Good day, everyone. Welcome to another one of my series of interviews with subject matter experts from throughout the country and throughout the world. My name is Cindy McDonald. I'm an instructor for the UCLA program in college counseling, and it's my privilege and honor to interview people in this subject matter, and getting their knowledge and information and their expertise. So today I have with me Patrick O'Connor. And Patrick is the Associate Dean of College Counseling at Cranbrook School in Michigan. So welcome, Patrick. We're glad to have you.
Well, thanks, Cindy. It's great to be here.
So we have some questions for you. First of all, can you just give us a little bit of information about your background and your experience? How did you come to be a college counselor?
Sure. Yeah, this is actually my 32nd year as a college counselor. And I started off, actually that was my goal. My ultimate goal was I started as a teacher, but my ultimate goal was to become a school counselor, because I think, there's something still pretty exciting about helping young people chart their course, and college is really one of the biggest decisions that they can make that helps shape that course. So that's really something I've wanted to do pretty much as a lifelong goal when I was in undergraduate. So in those 32 years, I've worked in a lot of different places. My first job was in a rural school district about 60 miles away from Detroit, which is where I'm from, and then moved in a little bit closer into I would say an urban sort of district closer to Detroit, and done public and private, and also did 8 years of community college, and that's where my caseload was 1,000 students, so that was kind of interesting. And then somewhere along the way, had a little time to do some independent counseling work as well. I don't do that anymore now that I'm here at Cranbrook. This is my 5th year here. So lots of good work experience with lots of different families with levels of need that vary a great deal. And then also managed to squeeze in some time to work with NACAC. I'm a past president of the National Association for College Admission Counseling. Currently work on the commissioner board of AICEP, the Certified Education Planners Group, and then also was a past president of Michigan Association for College Admission Counseling, and I wrote a couple of books along the way as well.
So what are some of your books that you wrote?
The two big ones are College is Yours, which is a college guide for students, and College is Yours 2.0, which was sort of the updated version of that, and that one's still available. And then last year just finished College Counseling for School Counselors. As many of your students may know, one of the challenges in terms of going to graduate school is that there are many graduate programs that don't really address college counseling. And so the book is really designed to be sort of a self-paced introduction to the key essentials of college counseling for folks who want to try and learn it on their own. So that's out there as well.
Oh, fabulous. I think a lot of our students would be very interested in that. And we keep a list. I've started a list of different books for resources. So that's very good to know. I will definitely have students look at that. So describe the counseling with your background, your experience. You've been on all these different sides. How do you approach the counseling? What's your counseling approach for your office?
Well, I'm really fortunate that we have a very experienced team of college counselors here at Cranbrook, and one of the things that we do is we start in 9th grade. We start with our 9th and 10th graders, but unlike many other schools, all of our students are pretty much geared towards going to college. They start the upper school experience here with the understanding or the expectation that they're going to go to college. So we're in a position where we have to, in some respects, help them get the big picture about college. We want to make sure they don't start 9th grade thinking about SAT scores or thinking about specific colleges, but rather thinking about the qualities they need to develop to become a successful college applicant and a successful college student. And so our entire 9th grade curriculum is really small group presentation and large group presentation with all of the 9th graders, where we try and emphasize the same skills that their teachers do in the classroom. The importance of study skills, the value of learning in extracurricular experiences, the value of community service, and really what it means to be an active contributing member of a school the key that we think our students need to understand is that to get the most out of college, you have to make the most out of high school. And so we really focus ninth and 10th grade on those qualities and less on specific steps or logistics associated with getting into college. That also tends to calm the students down a little bit, especially if they have older brothers or sisters that are going through the process. They sometimes know a little bit more than they ought to know at that level, and so they get so caught up with things like, well, letters of recommendation, for example. We want them to take a step back and sort of see the big picture. And then in 11th and 12th grade, that's when we begin looking at specific colleges and starting them in the more formal process at that point.
I think that's a really great way to put it, is get the most out of college. You need to get the most out of high school. So what are some of the things that you recommend for students in terms of how can they do that?
Well, one of the things that we talk about primarily is, or especially, is the whole notion of study skills and developing those. It's really interesting how so many people have to, how many students are under the impression that they equate getting A's with being a good student. And yet, we all have had experiences as students and as educators where we see lots of students getting great grades, but they're not working very hard for them. Or they get great grades, but right after the test, they forget everything they learned, as opposed to really understanding it and applying it in a variety of different ways. So we encourage our students to go a little bit deeper with the knowledge, to try and figure out how they can apply what they're learning in English, in social science, for example, really sort of cross-apply all that information and to sort of take it to the next level. We have a good number of students who will spend part of their summer doing research in laboratories, or doing research and reading in the social sciences, for example, really kind of personalizing that process and taking their interest in learning outside the classroom and to the next level. Now, certainly a lot of those students will take courses in summer programs at colleges, which have their own benefit, but it's also saying a lot about a student when they want to make the learning their own. And that's a big piece of it for us as well.
So do you teach students how to do Cornell notes or some other note-taking process or organizational skills and things like that? I think so often we in schools just figure students are going to learn this by osmosis.
Yeah. We're fortunate that we have a very seasoned faculty here at Cranbrook, and so many of the specific study skills for each particular discipline are actually already built into their curriculum. And so in that sense, we're in good shape. What we do is we do provide some hints on time management and some presentations on time management, and the importance of skill building, of developing a good resume, and some introductory career components. But we, in terms of the essential components for study skills, we partner effectively with our colleagues in the classroom to really create a universal web of support where everybody's singing from the same hymnal, and that makes it pretty successful.
It does. I've worked with the AVID program for many, many years, and
Sure.
successful AVID programs do the same thing. You have reiterated in the classroom, and many of the teachers who are running the AVID program are subject matter teachers. So it creates a very cohesive program, and it creates a message that the students, a very unified message too. So you're in the midst of the college application season. How do you manage that process in your office?
Yeah, well, we begin seeing our students, we're on more of a, I would say, traditional calendar, in that we begin to see all of our students individually in the second semester of the junior year. And we will see our students anywhere from 3 to 5 times in that second semester to really get to know the students well. Now, as part of that, what we've discovered is that even though our caseloads are pretty manageable, it's really important to manage your office and manage your time so that you make the most of the time with the student. When we're writing letters of recommendation, or when a college calls and says, tell me more about this student, they don't necessarily at that point want to know, how many years they were a varsity athlete, because that's someplace else on the application. So we want to spend this time really getting to know the student as a person so that we can talk again about those qualities that colleges are looking for. It's interesting, when students hear, when we have colleges that come visit our campus, and when students here say to our college admissions folks, what are you looking for in a student? They never give them numbers and grades. What they talk about qualities. They say, we want students who are good thinkers. We want students who are good community servants. We want students who go the extra mile. And so with that goal in mind, we spend our time with our juniors and with our seniors in those interviews, really getting to know them so that we can write effective letters of recommendation. Now, of course, we need to know about their varsity letters and their other accomplishments. And that's why we use, through Naviance, a series of online interview tools where the students give us that information in writing, and it's in their electronic file. And so as a result of that, we can study that information before the first meeting and any other meeting to really understand what the student is looking for in the college experience. But we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about everything they've done or reviewing their entire resume verbally, because we already see that in person. And that's really, I think, the advice I would give for any public school colleague in particular. See what you can do to try and create a survey monkey or some kind of very, very affordable technology that gives the student the opportunity to give you some of that basic information that you need, but really give you the chance to clear out that time with the student so that it isn't questions like, have you signed up for the SAT? And more like, what was a meaningful learning experience for you? Or where do you see yourself 5 years from now? The big question we ask at Cranbrook when we always start with students is, what's next for you?
Mm-hmm.
We don't say what college is next for you, because what next for you really gives the students permission to answer that question any way they wish. And so it might be that they'll say, well, I'm thinking about college. But more likely they're going to say, I've always wanted to live on the West Coast, or I've really had this interest in photography, or, I think I'm going to head into my dad's business. And what really in opening up the question, it gives them permission to sort of open up their answer. And then we figure out how to fit college into the appropriate slot as they're designing their bigger life plans. And that, again, takes a lot of tension out of the college selection process, because now they see it as a step, but it's not the only part of the process.
I think that is something that we as counselors really need to communicate and encourage with our students and their parents too, because it's not about getting into college, it's about what is your next step, and college is a part of that. I tell students' families, I'm not here to help you do your applications. I'm here to make sure you have a successful transition from high school to college. And I think that creates a much healthier environment. And students need to do that self-exploration. So by starting in 9th grade, they're already starting that process. And it sounds like you're encouraging and promoting that and cultivating that throughout each year that they're in high school.
Right. And part of the picture for us too is to encourage students as 10th graders to go visit college campuses.
Mm-hmm.
And we give them some context though, and very often the minute you tell a 10th grader go look at colleges, they all want to go see Harvard and Oxford. And it's like, look, we have some pretty nice colleges here in Michigan. And the goal of this exercise is to understand what makes colleges different from each other. What makes a big school big? What makes a liberal arts school a liberal arts school? What's it like to be in an urban campus? What's it like to be on a rural campus? Really kind of get a feel for the different colleges that are out there. We want to make sure that students aren't tied to a specific school, but we also want to make sure that they don't come to us in the junior year and say, well, any school is going to be okay. And so we feel that the best way to do that, particularly with what we're finding, particularly with some of our male students, is that they need an end sight. They need an end game. Like, okay, what's the goal here? And in visiting a college campus, they'll say, oh, okay, this is where the objective becomes more real. This is where everything sort of falls into place. And it's like, okay, if that's the light at the end of the tunnel, now let's have a conversation about what I need to do to get there. And again, this is a great exercise that's used to try and fill in the big picture by looking at the end rather than the individual piece.
I think that's great. And that's a great way to really empower students in the process. Are there other things that you do to empower students in that process?
Yes, well, certainly, when you're at a private school and parents are paying really pretty good salary or pretty good tuition to have them here, they obviously have their set of expectations too. And so what we've discovered is that one of the ways we need to support our students, and remember, the student is your client. The parents are along for the ride and certainly deserve support for a whole lot of reasons, but they're part of your team. But ultimately, the student is your client. And so we put together a series of evening programs and other communication tools that are designed to keep parents in the loop and also give them some structure about what they can best do to support their student, which we find, and this is not just at my school, but which we're all finding as a profession. Sometimes that involves telling parents things they shouldn't be doing as well as things they should be doing.
Right.
And so through our evening programs, through our weekly newsletters, we're trying to guide parents and sort of shape an atmosphere of support that will give the student the space to explore their likes, their dislikes, in terms of college and in terms of life in general, with the right measure of support and the right level of questioning from both counselors and parents.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, especially when we have the what people describe as the helicopter parents, or and a lot of times parents will contribute to some of the anxiety and things that students are feeling. So
Right, exactly. And sometimes it's important too to remind parents that some things have changed in the college process since they went through it,
mhm,
or in some cases even since their oldest child went through it.
right.
That's sometimes a harder piece. We'll have parents who will say, "Okay, I can understand why this would have changed from 20 years ago when I was, when I was applying." But my oldest son applied 4 years ago. How different can it be? And the
Right.
answer is it's night and day. So sometimes the challenge isn't with the first time parent, who is usually rather receptive to what you have to say. Sometimes it's the returning parent who thinks that this is going to be a rerun of the experience they had with their oldest child 2 or 3 years prior. And so you always have to keep your antenna focused on what the specific needs of parents will be in terms of creating a safe space for your kids to go to college.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That it's the rerun parents, like, oh, I've got this in the bag. I know what I'm doing,
Right,
and
right, right.
it's like they don't realize that even 2 years can make such a difference in terms of. So, how do counselors keep up with all that? How do you know how things are different from 2 years ago or 4 years ago?
Yeah, well, it is important to remember that if you're not careful, especially if you're an independent or especially if you're at a private school, well, and I guess that's also true for public school counselors who never get out of their office because they're seeing too many kids in one day. No matter where you are, in general, this can be a very isolating profession if you're not careful. And the irony is that while counselors keep telling kids that they have to take care of themselves, we as counselors do a pretty bad job of that. So, what I try and do, and what we encourage everybody here to do, is to be good to ourselves as we would expect our students to be good to themselves. And that means things like taking time to attend conferences, you know, participating in workshops, presenting in workshops, and also there are some great online resources. If your students aren't familiar with, for example, the NACAC Exchange, which is an email support system where folks like me can get on there. We had a student today, for example, who was interested in a very unusual major, and so we jumped on the exchange list and said, we're looking for this particular major. And because there are hundreds of other counselors throughout the world on the NACAC Exchange, within 5 minutes, we'll get answers that say, think about this college, think about this college. And so it's really an online support group that provides suggestions and ideas for how to help your students. So staying in touch there is important. The other piece I would say is to make sure that you stay on top of your college admissions office. We're fortunate because we allow colleges to come visit our students, and we get about 150 a year. and we make it a rule that no college admissions officer leaves our school without having at least a 5-minute conversation with one of our team. And that's not just how we find out the latest in their admissions policies, but we have a chance to ask them questions like, so what did you, as you read applications last year, what did you see that you liked? What did you see that you didn't like? If you had to give essay advice to a student, what advice would you recommend and why? We find that in doing this, it creates good relationships with admissions officers so that if we need to call them about a student later on, that's helpful. But more important than that, when parents and students ask us questions, it's not our opinion. I'm not offering what I think would make a good essay. Instead, I can say, well, when the representative from Lafayette was here, this is what they said about college admissions essays. This is what they said you should be writing about. And there's some degree of authority that the college admissions officers have with the students, which makes sense because they're the ones reading the application. So I would say conferences, online support systems, and really making sure that if those college folks are coming to your high school or you're interacting with them in any capacity, having even just 5 meaningful minutes of conversation is a great way to stay on top of things.
I think that's excellent advice. And for internationally, I mean, colleges are visiting schools and programs even internationally. So for some of our international counselors, that's also even probably more important because that's the one way that they can really get that feedback from the colleges themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. It's a great resource.
So how do you mentioned Naviance and having an online survey. How do you use technology in your office?
Well, we use Naviance, and Naviance, of course, is helpful because it keeps a running track record of all of your students and where they've applied. And so that's a great tool in terms, we use it to send out transcripts and teacher letters and counselor letters and final transcripts. It's really a very valuable tool for that. It's also a valuable tool in that it can show us where our students are in the process. What applications have they submitted? What we need to do to support those applications. It's a nice way for us to use a half an hour of online review to get a good scan of where all of our students are. And so that piece of technology is most advantageous. And there certainly are some pieces of Naviance that can be replicated in different ways, or there are other programs that offer the same kinds of services. I know some schools that are financially strapped use some version of a spreadsheet to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so there are some other ways to do this that may not be as expensive as a program like Naviance, but that's helpful. We also we still use email, and our kids are still responsive to that. What we're hearing is that many high school counselors are running into some challenges with kids not reading email because it's too old-fashioned, which really blows my mind, but that's a story for another day. So as I talk to some other public school counselors in particular, many of them are going to text-based programs like Remind 101, where students are able to sign up for a program and then you're able to text them, even though you don't know what their cell phone number is because there's a privacy issue there. But Remind 101 and other similar programs helps teachers or counselors send out notices like, don't forget this deadline, this scholarship is due. And that's another effective way to get to our students who don't read email. So we're looking into using more of that, but right now we're pretty happy with email. And that's also how we send out our weekly newsletter to our seniors and our juniors, is through email. And we just actually did an online evaluation of our services with our parents and students. And they said the online newsletter is read by something like 86% of the people who are in our community. That's a pretty good sign, I think.
Yeah, that's a very good percentage, I think. So in closing, what piece of advice would you give to counselors who are new or just coming into this and looking at setting up or managing college counseling within their offices?
Well, I think the the first piece of advice I would offer to new counselors is don't be afraid to use other people's ideas. There really is no need to reinvent the wheel. As a quick example of that, when I first came into my own office, the number one complaint that parents said is we never know what's going on. So every week for about an hour, I wrote this newsletter and then sent it by email, and the parents loved it. Well, the second year that I was there, basically, if it was the third week in October, I picked out the third week in October from the year before, changed the date, made sure the information was all relevant, and sent it out again. And the parents thought I was a genius that year too. So you don't always have to start from scratch because you have a new audience every year.
Right.
So, in terms of many of the challenges that new counselors face, veteran counselors have faced in the past, I would say, seek out their counsel, get on their exchange or get on the NACAC exchange and find out what they have done that has been successful and then tweak that to meet your own specific needs. That would, I think, be the key piece of advice. There's a lot more than that, but that's what I'd start with.
Yeah, I think that because once you set up a protocol or an approach, and this is how, when you're doing these different aspects or ask for recommendations or whatever it is, then you replicate that every year and it'll streamline that process for you. It's like setting up your own class plan, your curriculum for a class. You get it set up once and then you just keep repeating it and refining it. And as you said, continuing with the professional development and contributing to that, because then you stay current as you're using your process. But I think so often people don't set up the process in the beginning and they just kind of becomes crisis intervention and management. And by going from a process, then you can get on top of that.
Right, absolutely. And I think other piece that you mentioned, Cindy, is it is important for students or for counselors to make sure that they allow some time for last minute things. One of the things we've learned or we do here at Cranbrook is we actually sort of throw in an hour a day that we say that's our hold hour. And the hold hour, much as we'd like to say it's a great chance for us to catch up on email, the reality is that's our chance to catch up on the crisis of the day. And so it is important not to overschedule yourself if possible and leave a little leeway to deal with those last minute things too.
Yeah, I think that's very good. I was thinking about one of the things you said earlier of connecting and getting to know your students. And I've been a public school counselor to a couple, in different settings, and going out during lunch, I'd actually hold special brown bag lunches. And I learned this from a counselor in San Diego. And that way people would come to me and I get to know them. Otherwise, if I sat in my office all the time, all I saw was one set of students, the ones who were always getting in trouble, and I never got to meet any of the other ones. So I had to reach out and find ways to connect with them, and it also builds the concept of what a counseling office was, because so often they think, oh, it's where you go because it's like going to the principal office where you're in trouble, but that's not what we do as counselors. And especially in a college counseling office, which we don't have any of that here in Central California. I've never seen a college counseling office, but having that as a mindset and bringing that to students and parents can make such a difference.
Yeah. No, I think that's really quite true. And I think it's also important to try and involve your parents as early as you can. And really, the thing about college counseling in particular is it's not a vacuum. Many times when I went to ed school, they said, well, there's this theory called the empty vessel theory, where our job is to pour it into the empty students' heads and then they memorize it. There are days I wish that was the case, but the reality is when it comes to college counseling, most people have some preordained ideas about what college is all about.
Right.
And so you have to sort of starting in ninth grade, you have to shape not only the students, but the parents' attitudes and help them sort of unlearn some of the things that they may have picked up that will get in the student's way if you're not careful. So starting early with that is really an important skill to build into your college counseling curriculum.
I agree. I think that's one of the most important things. And if we've done that successfully as counselors, then we've, truly impacted a student, and not only that student, but future
Mm-hmm.
generations.
Yep,
And,
absolutely.
that's what we're here to do, going back to
Right,
what you started with. So,
right, right, right.
well, thank you very much. This has been very illuminating. I appreciate your time and dedication, and definitely will follow up and give people a link to the books that you have. Because, see, I learned something new from talking to you today, too. So I didn't know you
Yeah.
had done that. I think that's fabulous. It doesn't surprise me at all. So,
Well,
um,
Cindy, thanks for the chance to do this. It's been great.
all right. Well, you take care, and good luck with all your seniors in this crazy season.
Yeah, thanks. Take care, students.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.